Hey, my name is Graeber and in this video I'm doing part 2 of my January wrap-up. But this involves just one book because I feel like it's going to take me a little bit longer to talk about it, and also the books that were in part 1 and the books that are in part 3, it kind of goes together like that based on type of book. So this will possibly be the shortest one of the 3, but also we know I like to ramble, so that book is The Dawn of Everything by David Graeber and David Wengrow, with a subtitle A New History of Humanity. This is a non-fiction book. I borrowed it from my dad. This is a big non-fiction book. It's information. And I started reading this book in December. And I actually mentioned it in one of my December videos, although it wasn't uploaded. It wasn't even edited until January. Did I even film it in December? I am not sure. I think so. Yeah, I did film it. I filmed it in December. And I mentioned there that I was reading this book. So if you've seen that video, hi, I finished it. But it took a month? No, just under a month. Maybe between 3 to 4 weeks. I'm not sure, I'd have to check. But either way. Now this is a big book, as you can see, and although this part of it is bibliography, and index, so I didn't read that part, unless like if you're looking for something specific. This part is notes, which I did read, but the font is a bit smaller than in the rest of the normal bit of the book. My dad hasn't actually read this book yet. He bought it, well, he actually wanted me to buy it for him. Somebody recommended it to him. I look forward to see if he's going to get on with it, because this was very interesting, but also a kind of dense read, so it took me a long time to get through it, and I don't feel like I understand everything. So I think it's definitely something that's worth rereading at some point in the future. Oh, I haven't actually told you what it's about. That's hard to summarize though. So I will show you the inside flap here. So if you want to read that, you could pause the video. Although if you're watching it on the phone screen, it might be a bit small. This is about, well, this is A New History of Humanity. So it is about history, very early humans. It's not the easiest book to read, and I feel like I learned stuff, but I don't feel like I can summarize it or that I completely understood everything, which there are quite a few words in here, because this is written in English. This is, and there are quite a few words in here that I didn't know, and so I asked some of them to my partner. He is British. We live in the Netherlands together. And he didn't know some of these words either, so some of the words are more like older or are not really used much anymore, so I'm sure that didn't help to my reading comprehension, but I did find it very interesting, and I feel like I learned stuff about early humans, but could I summarize this book or like emphasize the point that it was trying to make? Like it's in my head, but I can't really tell you, if that makes sense. So yeah. I don't know if that makes sense or not. Unfortunately, one of the authors, he passed away before this book was published. So there is a foreword and dedication by the other author. So they wrote it together. It says here that the David Graeber passed away just over 3 weeks after the two of them finished writing this book, and it took them over 10 years. Doing all the research and everything, because this book is written by academic researchers, and which I think is very sad that he never got to see their book published. So yeah, it was a very interesting read, and it talks about many different indigenous peoples, early peoples. I'm not sure sometimes of the correct English terminology, but the book does make the point. It makes one of the points it makes is that so like these early peoples are indigenous peoples, so not Western Europeans, but like in South America, in North America, for example. Yeah, like I said, words like these earlier peoples are generally in research thought of as like they would be less than what they call the civilized world, but yeah, so racism also comes to play in this book, and this book is on the good side. Let me just put that out there, because I'm really struggling with my words and trying to remember the concepts of this book and to put it into words. So these two authors are Jewish, they're Americans. The book kind of begins with a what is called the indigenous critique, and again I'm struggling to put it into words. As you can tell, I will try to edit this and, you know, remove some of my pauses and ers and stuff. I always try to do that. So it'd be interesting to see how my dad gets on with this, because see, I read a lot of books in English. He does read books in English for his work, but not for fun, or right, like fiction he reads in Dutch. Now this is not fiction, but this is also not related to his job directly. So he is used to reading more technical English, more than me, because although I did have to read technical English for my study, which was again in a different field, but it's been a while for me, whereas he obviously still, that's not obvious to you maybe, but I graduated, and so I'm not doing anything with that anymore. Rambling. Yeah, I did say this was going to be a long video on just one book. So this book is not the same as the Dutch book De meeste mensen deugen niet, which I mentioned in, so the video that I was referring earlier is the video that is the review of that book. But the author of that book does have a quote on this book. So I told my dad that book is in Dutch and it's easier to read. So I suggested to him maybe read that first, because I borrowed that book from my parents as well. Really, you should have seen that video, but I guess not everybody who's watching me now was also watching me in December. So, although really my subscriber count is, you know, not, anyway. Yeah, so the book begins with like what's called the indigenous critique, which is trying to remember his name and where I can find it, where this indigenous person had a discussion with a certain European person, and when I say indigenous, I actually mean, I think he was indigenous from America. Wow, yeah, words. I also can't remember exactly whereabouts is this. So I'm trying my best here. I am not at all educated in this subject, other than the primary school and high school in the Netherlands, but I haven't done any studies or anything like this. And I would say this is not easy to read for the lay person, if that's the right word. So the beginning of this book is a little bit similar to what the book De meeste mensen deugen niet was trying to say. So that's why in the beginning I thought they were similar, because they start off with a similar thing, but then it just kind of goes in a different direction. But I found it very interesting. I'm not giving this a bad review, let me put that clear. Make that clear. I liked it. It took me a while to read it. I found it very interesting, and it's great. I got to borrow my dad's copy, because this book was not cheap, considering I bought it for him, so I know. But I get why it's you know, it's quite big. A lot of research went into this, and it was really interesting. I didn't understand everything, but I'm probably not the target audience. I don't know what the target audience for this is, but probably people who are more at home in this field, this era of history. I'm not at home in any era of history. History is not my, not something that I've ever been good at, but that's a whole other discussion. I find it interesting, and it depends on what. I find some areas of history more interesting than others, which that's fair enough. But it is not my specialty or anything. It's interesting, but not always the easiest thing for my autistic brain to understand, because I always want all the details, and sometimes that is not directly said. Anyway, I'm rambling now. Yeah, so some of the things this book talks about, and I know this video is all over the place. Don't blame you if you're totally confused. So am I. But if you're interested, do check out, I guess, other reviews of this book. This is not really a review. This is more thoughts from me. It talks about what is a state and the foundation of the state, by which I don't mean a state as in the US state. That's not what I mean. And what civilization is. It talks about that equality, inequality, warriors, and also women versus men in these societies. They also mention like what, well, not evidence is not the right word, but like what remains were found that they can conclude this or that from it. They cite a lot of sources and bibliography. The notes at the back are sometimes just like what source it came from. Other times it is like a longer explanation of something. Or so I read the notes because I thought it's interesting. Yeah, so I also, during the reading, whenever it then has a footnote, I have to go to the end to then, so that's probably slowed it down a little bit, but that's, you know, this is not a book really that you're meant to just, I guess, read like I do. It's definitely a book that requires some processing, and but I found it interesting. Do I remember everything? No, but that's never really the case if I read an information book. My brain just doesn't have that capacity anymore. But yeah, I found this very interesting. And like I said, it talks about various early peoples in various places of the world. I believe also certain places in Asia, for example, show up. I thought it was really interesting, really good. Yeah, it was not the easiest to read for me. My first language is Dutch, so there's that. But if you've seen any other of my videos, I read other books in English, you know, but this is more technical and formal English, and a bit more dense to read. I read some of the sentences out loud to my boyfriend, my partner, and he agreed. He's British, as I said before, but I found it very interesting. Yeah, I can't begin to summarize. I'm sure other people could. So that's not, I think that's more me than the book. But yeah, if you're a lay person, then this might not be the easiest book for you to read. And in fact, there have been other books written about early human history, which this book says that some of the things that have been known up to this point are wrong. So there is that. But I mean, this is, I guess, not the best book to maybe start with. But it does say, you know, what these and these people said was wrong for this and this reason. So in that sense, this definitely clears up some things that people have been thinking about wrongly, if that makes sense. And so the subtitle here for chapter 1, oh, you can't really read that, is why this Farewell to Humanity's Childhood, or why this is not a book about the origins of inequality. So that's not what the book is about. The book mentions though, like men and women in these different peoples, and yeah. Right, there's just the name of the indigenous critiquer. His name is Kandiarong. Although that may not be the correct pronunciation. Kandiarong? I am not sure. Which was, I think, was it him telling a priest? So that's actually in chapter 2, not chapter 1. I'll just read this bit to you, which is like, that's like a sub chapter within a chapter, if that makes sense. This is the title. So it says, and I will hold this up for you first so you can also read it, in which we introduce, we as the authors, the Wenda philosopher statesman Kandiarong, and explain how his views on human nature and society took on new life in the salons of Enlightenment Europe, and then between brackets, including an aside on the concept of schismogenesis. I don't know if schismogenesis, if that's the correct way to pronounce that term. This book introduces that term. I hadn't heard of it before reading this book. That is something that comes back in the book several times. But yeah, I don't know how to pronounce that because I've never seen a word before. So just going based on how I would, but so that may not be correct. But that is a term I learned from this book. It comes back to this again near the end of the book. So this was an interesting read. I gave it 4 stars, and I don't normally mention my ratings. And for myself personally, I rate in a system of out of 10, but really I find rating books very difficult. Goodreads wants you to rate them, so I do that. But I find it very difficult to do so. Anyway, so I like this book. I didn't love it. It's definitely a book that requires some brain power to process, and I don't always have that. In fact, I often don't have that. That's why I usually read more easier to read books, because I usually don't have the brain power. It's also why I haven't been reading as much like adult fantasy and adult science fiction, for example, because I just don't have the brain power lately, the past while, to, keep all characters straight in my head and everything. So, and plot twists and processing stuff. Yeah, it took me a while to read this book, obviously. And it's to me, right, reading, let's say, a page of this with possible then reading some of the notes in the back takes a lot longer than reading, let's say, a page of this, or a page of this. Just showing you some examples that I still have laying on this table, because it is still the same day as when I filmed part 1. But I found this very interesting, and I'm glad I read it. I don't regret reading it. I think it would be good to, in the future, reread it, or at least reread certain parts of it. Given that I don't quite understand everything, I struggle to tell you what exactly it's about or what it's trying to say. Which I think is more my fault than the author's fault. But yeah, so this, because it's quite dense, the text, but I found it interesting. So yeah, I think I should probably just stop talking now about this book and continue filming part 3 of my January videos. Thank you very much for watching this video, and I hope to see you in my next one. Bye!